Tonight on Need to Know, the outgoing president of one of America's historic seminaries has much to say about politics, inequality, and race, and our role as voices for change, the state of our society, and what we can do about it, according to the Reverend Marvin McMickle. That's next. Also on the show, can combining literature and yoga promote a healed self and an empowered community? Two Rochester women say it is possible. They explain how. Don't go anywhere. Need to Know starts right now. To say that the Reverend Marvin McMickle is a powerful presence in our community is an understatement. The president of Colgate-Rochester-Crozier Divinity School is widely known for being an active member in the fight for social justice. He is certainly not afraid to get political and has no fear of ruffling the feathers of fellow leaders. Whether you've read one of his 12-plus books, checked out his guest essays in the Democrat and Chronicle, listened to one of his speeches, or sat in on a lecture, you are sure to walk away rethinking your role as a member of the human race. McMickle announced his retirement as president of Colgate effective this June, but that doesn't mean his pursuit for racial, social, and economic justice will end. Joining me now in the studio is the Reverend Marvin McMickle, and it is an honor to have you back.
Oh, thank you very much. Here. Good to see you. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
So Marvin, when you look at the state of our society today, culturally, politically, morally, and so on, what do you see?
Oh, terribly fractured. Along lines of politics, along lines of religion, along lines of gender, along lines of race, along lines of economic class distinction, along lines of region, the coasts versus the middle of the country. And I don't see anybody on the horizon with the capacity to help us bridge many of those divisions. So I'm hopeful that it can be bridged. But I think we need people in leadership positions who do not thrive on making the divisions starker than they are right now. And I think that's really the biggest challenge that this country faces at the moment.
And I know you said that you don't see someone at this moment who can help to bridge these divides. Is there a role that we can play just as everyday citizens and helping
be
to make
true to yourself.
Work?
I mean, one of the awful things about human nature is its capacity to get drawn into groupthink and to follow the crowd and to do what someone else is doing, and you are a little reluctant to be the contrarian in the room. It is the contrarians who have changed the course of history. And so I invite people to not give up their own value system in order to accommodate somebody else's, or to not stop thinking when people say things that are just blatantly outrageous and largely untrue. So yeah, democracy is a one person at a time operation. We are not a monarchy. We're not an oligarchy. We are governed by ourselves. That's been the aspiration all along. I urge people to reclaim their own voice, reclaim their own authority to speak, to think, to vote, to disagree, to advocate for their own positions as aggressively as they can.
Well, for people who don't know, in addition to you being president of Colgate, you're a best-selling author who has written, as I mentioned before, more than a dozen books, a veteran pastor, a professor, and a speaker, and everything you do connects to faith and religion.
Yeah.
And I want to know, what was it that inspired you to take this course for your life?
Martin Luther King Jr. When I was 16 years old, I was called to the ministry. That would have been 1964. But I had not yet found a model for what I wanted that ministry to look like. So I just kind of kept the sense of vocation in the back of my mind. I was actually working for Playboy magazine. Well, I was printing it.
Yeah.
I worked for Poole Brothers Printing Company.
Yeah.
Their sole product was Playboy. So here I was. I just finished a vocational high school in Chicago. I was running a linotype machine on the second floor, That's where the text was, the second floor. The pictures were on the fourth floor. Of course, I never went to the fourth floor, you know, at the age of 17 and 18. But one day during the lunch break, I was reading a local paper that said that Dr. King was coming to Chicago for this now famous 1966 housing campaign to challenge segregation in residential patterns in Chicago, which was at that time the nation's most racially segregated city, not in the South. Chicago was first, Cleveland was second, Gary, Indiana was third, and Detroit was fourth. Most people think that segregation was a Southern problem. He came to prove otherwise. I got involved in that summer campaign and began to find in him and in that set of issues the causes to which I wanted to devote my life. I got a PhD because he got a PhD. I started writing books because he was writing books. I mean, I just can't tell you the impact that his life had on mine.
Well, you have been called a champion in the fight for racial equity, social and economic justice in our country. And I want to know, at a time when you mentioned this, there's so much hostility right now in our nation. What do you think is one thing that we should be focusing on a nation, whether to fix, change, to reverse the course of where we are right now? Is there one thing that we need to hone in on?
Increasingly, I think we've got to think globally. This notion of xenophobia, this notion of preferring one country, one race, anything over all the rest, I think is self-defeating. We are part of a global community. You can't fix the water problem, you can't fix global warming, you can't fix the economy behind walls. These are global issues. So how do we begin to place ourselves in the middle of a global conversation about how to lift up fallen humanity in all of its sectors and all of its places? So, Dr. King used to say, you'll pardon this sort of reference back to him, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Well, there's enough injustice going on all around the world that if we do not think about it from a global perspective, if we just keep thinking about our own little backyard, things are bad enough there, but you can't fix these things from one country. So for you in your vocation and your call of work, to be in a vocation where one of your colleagues in Turkey is murdered and dismembered and carried away in bags, and there is no, massive uprising, no horrific pouring out of condemnations. You see, this is part of the problem. Because if it can go on there, then tyrants and autocrats anywhere else say, okay, I know how to silence my critics. I'll just kill them and cut them up and carry them away, and who will care? So I think we have to think not only about ourselves and our own country, but we've got to place ourselves in the global perspective. And that's a president's job, by the way. That's a congressional task, is to think about what is the role of the United States in relationship both to allies and adversaries, and find ways to live on the one earth that we share together. There is not another one, so we can't move someplace else. And if we don't act together, then you got the Benjamin Franklin, notion. We'll either hang together or we'll certainly hang separately.
Well, something some of our viewers may not know is during your 20-plus years as pastor of Antioch Baptist Church in Cleveland, you made a run for high political office 2 times. There were 2 unsuccessful runs. One was in 1998 for a House seat and again in 2000 for a Senate seat. Yeah. However, as one journalist put it, despite the losses, and this is a quote, you use the political pulpits to push your Christian-based social justice issues. So I want to know, for people who might say religious leaders have no role in the world of politics and vice versa, and stand by that philosophical notion of separation of church and state, how would you respond?
Yeah, I don't think that you ought to use your political position to advocate for a theological position. You should not use the offices of the Congress, the Senate, the presidency, the state legislature to advance a denominational issue like baptism or how to take communion. That clearly is a division that we ought not bridge. But there's nothing that suggests that persons who are in the ministry cannot take their own social justice perspectives on feeding the hungry, caring for the naked, caring for the imprisoned. Those may appear in sacred texts, but they have an easy transfer into the public sector. So that so long as you are not using your political office to advance a narrow religious agenda, which, by the way, many conservative Republicans do. They use their political position to advance what they perceive to be a religious ideology, whether it is same-sex marriage or a woman's right to choose. Okay, I would not want to limit myself to a handful of things, by the way, concerning which most of the country has a very different point of view than these on the far right. But people were concerned when I ran that I would somehow try to become the Christian U.S. Senator. No, I understand. I read the Constitution, too. I know just exactly what it says. I do know, by the way, that the notion of the separation of church and state does not appear in the Constitution, which many folks did not know. But it does say that there shall be no established religion, and that Congress shall not seek to set one up or prohibit the free exercise thereof. I'm all for that.
Well, you have criticized the White House and white evangelical leaders most recently into what you referred to as the sound of silence. And you took a cue there from Simon and Garfunkel's 1960s hit of the same title. And this was in relation to anti-Jewish hate crimes, pipe bombs that were being sent to political and cultural leaders. And you wrote this in a guest essay for the DNC. Where are Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, Lindsey Graham, Jerry Falwell Jr., Franklin Graham, Tony Perkins, and other apologists for Donald Trump? Is it a mistake that all of these events are occurring when the President of the United States regularly fires up his base with slogans designed to fuel division between people based upon race, religion, region, and political parties? And you went on to conclude by saying terrorism is at work in the United States, and you quoted Dr. King, who said, the problem is not the vitriolic words of bad people, but the appalling silence of good people. So first, how does your definition of terrorism at work in the U.S. differ from what we're hearing from the President of the United States right now?
Terrorism is pipe bombs in the mail. Terrorism is targeted attacks on people based upon religion, based upon sexual orientation, based upon anybody who is imposed upon, to a life-threatening situation based upon who they are as human beings. I don't know what he means by terrorism because I don't see what he's talking about. If he's talking about the one or two instances that he quoted in his speech the other night of persons who carried out horrific crimes, I would just remind him, most of the crimes in this country are by far committed, both in terms of number and in terms of percentage, by native-born Americans. So you cannot, here again, this is a targeting. You say, okay, here are 3 instances when a person that came across the border, 3 out of millions, but here are 3. Let's look at these terrible 3 things and say that if we could just build a wall, we could keep these 3 people out and ignore the fact that there are 10 million people in this country who are performing perfectly as citizens without having documentation. They're not killing anybody. So I don't know what the president means, and you know what? I don't think he knows what he means. I think he is still appealing to a base that needs someone to hate. And I think one of the dangers of the white population in America, not all of them by far, but for those to whom he appeals, is I think there is a real concern about a changing demographic in the country and the loss of a white majority and the sense in which immigration policies either add to or slow down that population shift. So for those who are really frightened by the thought of there not being a white majority in the country, immigration is one easy target to say, if we could just fix this, we could slow this down. But the notion that immigrants are the causes of all of our violence is laughable.
I'm going to transition just a little bit here because I read that one of your greatest memories in your time in Cleveland was throwing the opening pitch at the Indians game. This was in July 1994.
On the 4th of July.
So I want to know, what is one of your fondest memories of your time at Colgate?
This is going to sound odd. It really will. But I think we have known for a good while that the campus itself, beautiful as it is, was more than we needed and more than we could afford if our mission was education and not real estate. I'm really happy, though I'm torn, that we were able to make a decision about the future of the school that was not necessarily linked to the future of the campus. I am not a real estate developer. I'm not interested in, zoning ordinances, and so I'm into theological education, which we can provide in almost any setting that we can design. So I'm leaving Rochester, at least leaving Colgate Rochester Crozer Divinity School, having been content, that's a better word, that a really hard decision was made, a really big hurdle was crossed, and we were able to handle it in a way that brought our alumni, our donor base, our students, our faculty and staff with us.
And for people who don't know, you're talking about the transition of the campus from where it is right now, and the beautiful grounds, by the way, and you're moving to the Village Gate.
320 North Goodman Street. Well, near Village Gate.
Near Village Gate.
Yeah, not in the main complex, but around the corner. Yeah, we're renovating a property that'll have about 11,000 or so square feet, all on one level, so no more stairs, all with free parking. 21st century technology designed specifically for our use. Now, will it have all of the archways, all of the stonework, all of the apparatus of a 19th century educational institution? This school was built sort of with Yale in mind. And okay, we're not Yale and we're moving, and I'm glad about it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we have to close for now, but Reverend Marvin McMickle, is always an honor to have you on the program. Thank you for your passion for our community, and we wish you the best.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Thank you. Engaging in conversations about race doesn't have to be as challenging as some make it out to be. Two Rochester women have found that incorporating a good book and yoga in a non-judgmental environment is an ideal combination for learning more about ourselves and our world. The two recently launched an inclusive club called Books and Yoga. The mission is to promote a healed self and an empowered community. Joining me now to share more are the founders of Books and Yoga, Martisa Williams and Hannah Betts. And welcome to you both. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So my guess is I introduced this segment and some guests, or viewers I should say, are watching and thinking, so how in the world can a book and yoga help us have conversations about race and help us to feel empowered? So how would you explain the concept behind this? Martisa, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, so, I mean, the cliche that knowledge is power. So being able to read something that is a different perspective of what you're normally getting. The idea, Hannah always says that books allow us to learn outside of our own worlds. And that's really what it's all about. But I think that having the mix of the yoga piece allows you to bring that information back to yourself. Digest it, kind of let it simmer and marinate, and then you can move with that knowledge and do as you may with it.
With the intention of having action afterwards, like to have these conversations that can be difficult, but then to be able to meditate on it and then go out in the world and do something with that knowledge.
So I'm curious in terms of, was there something that you saw in our community or didn't see in our local community that made you say, we need something like this and we need it now?
I think for both of us, we were just looking to create a space that felt inclusive, and we both come from different worlds. And for me, growing up, I didn't read a lot in school. I didn't read a lot of books that were specifically written by authors of color, and I really wanted to really focus on that. And I think Martisa was kind of in that same boat. Just we didn't get a lot of that in our education.
Yeah, it wasn't until I got to U of R and specifically started studying gender studies and critical race theory and all of that, that I was like, so I went my entire life without this knowledge, and it's only me who went out and saw it that I got it. So that's why we were like, okay, we need to do something to help bridge the gap.
I think it's an interesting time. I'm going to kind of go into the yoga for just a moment. An interesting time to look at yoga in America, because it almost seems as though it's trying to reinvent itself, so to speak. And I think there are certain organizations, national organizations and local organizations locally, Yoga for a Good Hood, which both of you are involved in that group, to kind of, and I say this because when we would open up yoga magazines, right, we would see white women all the time in the magazines. You would go to a class and that's just kind of what you thought was the ideal person for yoga, and that is changing. And I'm curious if part of your mission is to address yoga's diversity issue as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And the accessibility of wellness. We think that that's so important. We know what yoga has done for us. We actually met in Yoga for Good Hood, so that's kind of where our relationship started. But just to see like and feel what that can do for us, like everybody should be able to have that.
Talk about what it has done for you. So for people who don't understand what the yoga experience is like and what it can do, what happens?
Well, it's my favorite thing to talk about. But I mean, for me, yoga is all about very much like a looking inward. We spend all of our days, all of our life outwardly searching, looking, learning, whatever, experiencing, and very few of us spend enough time moving inward to see how we are. How is all this stuff that we're inputting into our life, how is it setting in us? How is it changing us? How is it uplifting us or not uplifting us? And that's what I feel like yoga, one of the billions of things that yoga allows us to do, is it gives us a moment to like say, what's going on here? Let me check in. And then it opens up a whole new world, the inner world.
For me, it started for the physicality of it, and then I realized that it wasn't about that at all, that it was about like coming face to face with yourself on the mat and looking inward. And I think that was huge. It helps me deal with my anxiety that I have daily. And I think that it could do, I can do that for everybody. So just to be able to make it accessible and something that really everyone should offer, and Yoga for Good Hood does a beautiful job of that.
So do you make it kind of a bit more about the spiritual, more so than the physical when it comes to books and yoga?
It's a both.
It is.
It's both. I mean, for me, I think that for a lot of people come for the physical, but it's a inward route, I think. You know, you start sweating, you start working, and you're like, oh, there's more here than just this like physical sensation in my body. It's like a route inward. So, I mean, it's a little bit of both.
But especially coming from the conversations that we have, which can be difficult. I mean, and depending on even our demographic that's in our group, which changes all the time, but to have these conversations and then be able to go sit with it on your mat, I think is really powerful.
Let's talk about the conversations, because you're very intentional in the books that you select, and you ensure that whether it's a fiction book or a nonfiction book, it's written by a woman of color. And you explained a bit just about the opening ourselves up to stories that we haven't heard before. So what types of conversations are being generated when you get together and you just really go all in?
Well, we started with the book name is escaping me.
Why I'm no longer talking to white people about race.
Yes.
So we wanted to kind of start out with a bang. Like we wanted to be like, this is our mission. We're going to keep coming back to these books. I mean, it talks a lot about specifically white privilege. So it was just dealing with things that, you know, that are more difficult to talk about in kind of a group of people, not knowing where their backgrounds came from, who they are. So there was a lot of difficult conversation in that book, but I think we all grew from it, and it's one of our favorite books to this day.
Yeah.
How transparent are people when they're open and they're sharing, whether it's their own experiences or their perceptions? Are they raw? Are they feeling like they're in the space where they can just kind of unload, or are some people more reserved?
I think it depends on the person. Most people we have found is really open and honest and talking about their experiences. Oftentimes it ends up about us just like kind of talking about our lives rather than even the book. I mean, obviously we continue to reference the book, but it opens up so many doors to talk about more than just this text, but also our own experience in relation to the text.
Okay, and then you said after these conversations, difficult at times, you go to the mat, and then that's the process of just really working through what you've just ingested and shared.
Right.
And what are you hearing from people? What are you hearing from participants, whether when they're done with their practice after an event, or maybe someone's, I know you've been to a few events and they have a different way of looking at themselves or the world. What are they saying?
I mean, I think the book really depends on it. We just read Not That Bad, that's edited by Roxane Gay, and that was, I mean, it was a traumatic book. It was stories of rape culture in what's going on now, and it was hard to read, and we're like, why do we put ourselves through this? But these are conversations that we needed to have and that we needed to talk about. So that was a really interesting day on the mat, because I felt like we were all kind of just healing from that. It was just a pretty traumatic book. So I think it depends on the book that we're reading and kind of how people feel afterwards. But again, we really encourage that there's some sort of action after that, you know, because I think our minds are opening up and we're learning more, we're educating ourselves, and now what are we going to do with that knowledge?
And what types of things are you hearing that people are doing when it's all said and done and they're heading out there, you know, into the world? What are they doing? How are they acting?
People keep coming back. That's one thing. We get like repeat people who are coming every month, which is amazing for us. I mean, people are going out and they're having these conversations at home. They're sharing the books, all of that. So I think that it's gonna just continue to like trickle out and to see what people are doing. But people are being exposed to novels and texts and information that they wouldn't even have encountered or picked on their own. So.
And just to kind of walk in our city and see this kind of segregation that's going on, I think a lot of times, specifically as a white woman, I didn't see that for the longest time. I was taught to be colorblind. In reality, that's not the way that we should be walking through life. But I think you have to be able to open your eyes to that. And I think that these books and these texts are doing that for a lot of people, that we're able to walk through this city and say, you know what, this is a very segregated city.
Right.
What can we do about it? What kind of actions can we take towards it?
So for those who are tuning in right now and they're thinking, I want, you know, to attend, there's an event coming up on January 20th. How does it work? How can they sign up?
Yeah, so we're on Facebook and Instagram, Books and Yoga Rock, both spaces. And there's, in the link in both bios is tickets, and tickets are sliding scale. So it goes from $15 to $25, so whatever you can afford, we offer for you to just come and hang out with us. If you need help getting a resource with a book, we can make sure that that is set in stone. So whatever you need, just let us know, reach out to us, booksandyogarock@gmail.com for any information.
Great. Well, a special thank you to Martisa and Hannah for joining me today and for the work that you're doing. We appreciate it. And you can learn more about Books and Yoga and their upcoming events on their Facebook page. Just search for Books and Yoga Rock. And again, their next event is on Sunday, January 20th at 11:30 a.m. at the Lives Styled Studio on Gregory Street. And that wraps up another edition of Need to Know, Rochester's news magazine. I'm your host, Helene Bianduti Hofer. Thank you for joining me tonight and throughout the weekend on WXXI TV and online at WXXInews.org. Have a great night.